Hey, welcome back to the KidMin Word. I'm Ryan Frank, and I am so glad that you're here. Yesterday, we talked about being strong in the Lord and putting on that whole armor of God so we can stand against the enemy's schemes. Today, we're going to go one layer deeper. And honestly, this might be one of the most clarifying verses in all of the Scripture for anyone in leadership. Paul says in Ephesians 6, verse 12, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." Now, I want you to think through that again. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood. Let's pause there. It's not the parent who complained about your curriculum, not the lead pastor who doesn't fully understand your ministry. That's not who you're wrestling with. Not the volunteer who keeps showing up late. Not the elder board that keeps cutting your budget. You're not fighting against flesh and blood. Not the coworker who drives you crazy. Flesh and blood is not your real enemy. Now listen, I'm not saying that those situations aren't real and that they're not frustrating. They are. But Paul is pulling back the curtain here and saying there is a spiritual reality behind a lot of what you're experiencing. The real battle is not with people. It's against spiritual forces that are using circumstances and relationships to discourage, divide, and defeat you. Now, this changes about everything when I think about how I respond to people. If I'm in a conflict with someone in my ministry, before I fire off that email, before I go home and vent, before I start building my case, I need to ask myself, is it possible that the enemy is using this situation to distract me from what God is actually doing? I heard a story recently about a children's pastor named Marcus in a mid-sized church in the Midwest. Marcus interacted with our ministry a few weeks back, and he had been butting heads with one of the longtime volunteers in his ministry, right? And for months, different opinions about curriculum, different views on how to handle kids with behavioral challenges, different communication styles. They were just constantly doing this. And it got to the point where Marcus was genuinely considering asking this volunteer to step down from the team. But one morning during his quiet time, he was reading this verse, Ephesians 6:12, and something stopped him cold. He realized that he had been treating this lead volunteer like she was the enemy. He had been building this case against her, cataloging every frustration, every disagreement, and God quietly whispered to his spirit, "She's not your enemy. She loves these kids. You love these kids. Stop wrestling against flesh and blood." And Marcus reached out to her that week, not to address the conflict, but to thank her, to remind her that her faithfulness mattered. And you know what? They eventually had a real conversation, cleared the air, and that relationship became one of the strongest on his team over the last few weeks. It's been great. The enemy wanted division. God brought restoration. But it started when Marcus identified the real enemy. Now, that story might sound familiar to some of you because we've all been there where you have a staff person, a volunteer, and it's just like there's this tension. Here's the thing. Before engaging in a conflict, engage in prayer. Before responding to a person, remember that they're not the real enemy. And before you get worn down by the frustration of ministry, recognize that resistance often means that you're doing something worth resisting. Keep going. Pray first. And know your real enemy. We aren't wrestling against flesh and blood. Right? Now listen, I can't wait to continue the study tomorrow. We're going to continue. I hope that you'll be back. And if you haven't subscribed yet on YouTube, give it a subscribe. Share this with a friend, with your team. And we are so grateful that you're joining us every day, or as often as you can, for the KidMin Word. We'll be back tomorrow.